The night Sarah disappeared, the air in the neighborhood felt heavier than usual, like a storm was about to break, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Ethan had been the last to see her. They'd argued that night, nothing serious, just the usual sibling tension that had been growing lately. She'd locked herself in her room. That was around 10:15 p.m. By morning, her room was empty. No signs of a break-in. The police came, walked through the house with their notebooks and flashlights, but their faces told Ethan they had no real leads. Her bedroom door had been locked from the inside. The windows were shut and latched, the kind you can't open from the outside without breaking the glass. Nothing in her drawers or closet had been taken. The strangest thing. Her phone, wallet, and shoes were all still there. Neighbors whispered theories. Some said Sarah had a history of depression. Others suggested she might have been meeting someone in secret. But Ethan knew his sister. She'd never leave without telling him, and she'd definitely never leave barefoot in the middle of the night. 2 weeks passed. The search cooled. The police stopped coming. But Ethan couldn't. That's when he decided to return to the old family house, the one they'd abandoned when he and Sarah were kids. It was just outside town, swallowed by tall trees, their branches clawing at the roof. For years, no one had lived there. They said it was too damp, too cold, and too expensive to fix. But Ethan remembered the real reason their parents left. He remembered the noises in the walls, the whispering under the floorboards, the strange smell in the attic that would come and go without explanation. The house greeted him with the groan of old wood under his boots. The smell of dust hit him instantly. Dust and something faintly metallic. It wasn't just a building. It was like stepping back into a memory you wish you could forget. That first night, Ethan unpacked in the living room. He didn't dare sleep upstairs. Not yet. He woke to a faint knocking. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the rhythm was too precise. Knock, knock, pause, knock, 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 almost like a message. It was coming from the attic. He ignored it until the third night. This time, the knocking grew louder. More urgent, faster. Knock, 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 knock. His skin prickled with the realization. It was Morse code. But he didn't know what it was saying. On the fourth night, he gave in. The attic door was at the end of the upstairs hall. He hadn't opened it since they were kids. It was locked. Strange, since he didn't remember it having a lock. The knocking stopped the moment he touched the handle. The next morning, he found a small brass key under his pillow. He lived alone. He didn't own a brass key. When he finally unlocked the attic that evening, the smell hit him first. Stale air, dust, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. The light bulb overhead flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the room. Boxes lay stacked against the walls, covered in a thick blanket of dust. In the far corner, he saw it. A wooden trunk, slightly open. Inside was a tape recorder, the kind you'd see in the 80s. He pressed play. Static. Then, "Ethan!" It was Sarah's voice. His heart lurched. "Sarah! Where are you?" The recording continued, ignoring him. "They're in the walls! Don't trust the gaps!" A loud thud echoed from downstairs, as if something heavy had fallen. Ethan dropped the recorder and turned toward the stairs. Except there were no stairs. Where they should have been was just wall. Ethan's pulse slammed in his ears. Where the staircase had always been, there was now a seamless wall. No marks, no hinges, no frame. Just faded wallpaper that looked as though it had been there for decades. His first thought was that his mind was playing tricks on him. Sleep deprivation, stress, grief, They all mess with reality. But the cold certainty settling in his chest told him this wasn't just his imagination. He stepped closer and pressed his palm to the wall. The wallpaper was dry, brittle, with the faint texture of peeling paint underneath. He dragged his fingers down, searching for a seam, for any sign that this was some kind of hidden panel. Nothing. Behind him, the attic light flickered again. The shadows in the corners seemed to swell like ink bleeding through paper. He swallowed hard. "Sarah?" His voice cracked. A sound answered him, faint but sharp. Not knocking this time, scratching. It was coming from inside the wall. At first it was slow, irregular, like fingernails grazing wood. But then it grew faster, louder, as if something or someone was clawing to get out. Ethan backed away, his calves hitting one of the dusty boxes. He reached for his phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Not dead, just black. Even when he held the power button, nothing happened. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then, just behind his right ear, "You shouldn't be here." Ethan spun around, heart in his throat. The attic was empty. The dust in the air swirled lazily in the flickering light, disturbed only by his own frantic movement. He stumbled toward the trunk where he'd found the tape recorder, thinking maybe he'd imagined it all. But when he lifted the lid again, the recorder was gone. In its place was a small photograph. It was him, standing in the attic doorway just moments ago. Only in the picture, something stood behind him, tall, thin, leaning so close its head almost touched his. Its face wasn't a face at all, just a smooth, pale oval where features should have been. Ethan dropped the photo and lunged toward the wall again, pounding on it. "Let me out!" His fists struck hard enough to send dust raining from the ceiling. The wall didn't give. He closed his eyes, trying to remember the layout of the house. There was another way down. If he could crawl through the attic's far side, maybe he could reach the back stairs to the kitchen. He grabbed the flashlight from his backpack and swung the beam across the attic. The far end was narrower, crammed with old furniture covered in yellowed sheets. He began moving toward it, stepping over boxes and warped floorboards. The beam shook in his trembling hand. Halfway across, the flashlight flickered. For a fraction of a second, in the beam's dying light, he saw it. Standing between two covered chairs, the tall figure, still as stone, watching him. When the beam flared back to life, it was gone. Ethan forced himself to keep moving. His breath came in quick bursts now, echoing in the cramped space. He reached the far wall and spotted a hatch low to the ground, half hidden behind a broken wardrobe. He yanked it open and a rush of stale, icy air hit his face. Beyond was a crawl space that dipped down toward where he guessed the kitchen might be. It was narrow, pitch black, but it was his only option. He got down on his hands and knees, gripping the flashlight between his teeth. The wood under his palms felt damp and soft, the way old houses get when they've been left to rot. He started crawling. Behind him, in the attic, the scratching began again. Only now it was faster, closer. Ethan's knees scraped against the warped wood as he dragged himself forward. The crawl space smelled like mildew and rust, each breath thick with dust. The beam from his flashlight trembled against the low ceiling, catching glimpses of cobwebs and water stains. He moved fast at first, desperate to put distance between himself and the scratching. But the space forced him to slow. The ceiling dipped so low at points he had to tilt his head sideways, the cold wood brushing against his cheek. Every sound felt amplified here. The thud of his heartbeat, the faint creak of the house settling, his own breathing, rapid and uneven. Then he heard it again, Scratching. Not behind him this time. Ahead. He froze. The crawl space was too narrow to turn around. He could only go forward or backward. The scratching grew louder, sharper, as if whatever was making it was moving toward him. Ethan gripped the flashlight tighter. "Hello? Sarah? Is that you?" His voice sounded strange in the tight space, muffled, swallowed up by the walls. Silence. He forced himself forward inch by inch. The scratching stopped. He was almost certain he could hear breathing now, slow, deep breaths that weren't his own. Then the beam caught something ahead, a shoe. It was small, white, and speckled with mud. He knew it instantly, Sarah's sneaker. It lay sideways in the dirt, the laces frayed. His chest tightened. He reached for it, but the moment his fingers brushed the fabric, a shadow moved just beyond the light. A pale hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed his wrist. The grip on Ethan's wrist was ice cold, the kind of cold that burned. He yanked back instinctively, slamming his elbow into the cramped wall. His flashlight clattered to the ground, the beam rolling wildly over the dirt before pointing toward him. The hand retreated into the darkness ahead, but not before he saw it clearly. Too long, the fingers unnaturally thin, the nails splintered and blackened. Ethan snatched up his flashlight, his breath shaking. "Who's there?" No answer. He shined the beam ahead, but the crawl space was empty now. Just the shoe lying in the dirt. Something deep in his gut screamed at him to turn back, but he couldn't. Sarah's shoe was here. She had to be close. He crawled forward, each movement louder than he wanted. Palms slapping the damp wood, knees thudding in the silence. When he reached the spot where the hand had been, he found nothing but a few deep gouges in the floorboards. The crawl space narrowed so much Ethan's shoulders scraped the walls. Dust clung to his hair, his clothes, even the inside of his mouth. Each breath tasted like rust and rot. The air here felt stale, as if no living thing had breathed it in years. Somewhere ahead, faint light flickered, enough to paint thin lines across the wood like the fingers of something reaching in. He kept crawling, palms sinking into damp patches of soil that oozed cold water between his fingers. The slope became more pronounced, gravity pulling him forward. His knees throbbed from the unrelenting pressure against the rough boards. Every few feet, something soft brushed against his legs. At first, he thought it was hanging cobwebs, until his flashlight caught it. Tufts of hair, human hair. He froze, heart pounding. His mind screamed at him to turn around, but Sarah's shoe still weighed heavy in his pocket. He forced himself forward, dragging his body inch by inch. The light ahead grew stronger, a pale yellow glow that pulsed slightly as if matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. Finally, the tunnel ended at a warped sheet of plywood. He pushed against it with his shoulder, and it gave way with a groan, spilling him into a narrow pantry. He staggered to his feet, stretching muscles stiff from crawling. The pantry smelled damp, mold mixed with something faintly metallic, coppery. He stepped out into the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under his weight. The kitchen itself looked frozen in time. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, its weak light swaying gently, though there was no draft. The counters were covered in a thick layer of dust, broken only by a single clean spot. Perfectly rectangular, as if something had sat there for years and had just been moved. That something was there now, sitting in the exact center of the cleared space, the tape recorder from the attic. It looked untouched, no dust, no scratches, just sitting there as if waiting for him. Ethan's breath caught. His mind flashed back to the attic. The recorder had been silent then. Why was it here now? Before he could take a step, it clicked on by itself. The sudden sound made him flinch, the harsh hiss of static filling the quiet. Then a voice emerged through the noise. "Ethan, you're almost there." Sarah. His hands trembled as he moved closer. "Sarah! Sarah, where are you? Can you hear me?" Her voice broke through the static again, faint and strained, as if she were speaking from underwater. Don't let it touch you." "What? What are you talking about? Where are you?" The static swelled, drowning her out, but under it, something else whispered, so close it felt like the breath of a real person brushing against his ear. "Behind you." Ethan's entire body went cold. Slowly he turned. The kitchen light swayed harder now, casting long, warped shadows across the walls. Ethan's gaze crawled toward the far end of the room, where the darkness seemed to breathe. He didn't want to turn his head fully. His body resisted, every muscle tightening as if trying to anchor him in place. But the voice, low, deliberate, and far too close, still echoed in his skull. "Behind you." He forced himself to turn. At first, there was nothing, just the pantry door half open, the faint outline of the crawl space behind it. Then the shadows shifted. Something was standing in the corner. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs stretched too long for its body. The skin, if it could be called that, was a color of damp paper, sagging slightly, as though it had been hung over bones instead of grown there. It didn't move, didn't breathe. But Ethan knew, without question, that it was looking directly at him. The swaying light bulb flickered, and for a single, heart-stopping instant, it wasn't in the corner anymore. It was closer, halfway across the room. Ethan's breath hitched. He stepped backward, his shoes slipping slightly on the dusty floor. The tape recorder behind him clicked off, leaving only the groan of the old house and the pounding in his ears. He tried to speak, tried to say, "Who are you?" or "What do you want?" but his voice caught in his throat. The light flickered again. Now it was standing directly in front of the pantry doorway, blocking his only escape back to the attic. Its head tilted slightly to one side, the motion slow, deliberate. There was no face, just the faint outline of where eyes should have been, as if they'd been erased. Ethan stumbled toward the other side of the kitchen, reaching for the back door. The knob was icy under his palm, but when he twisted, it didn't move. Locked. The air grew heavier, thicker. A faint sound came from behind him, like wet cloth being dragged across the floor. He turned again, but the figure was gone. He swallowed hard, scanning every corner. His chest felt tight, each breath more difficult than the last. Then he heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Not on the floor. Above him. His eyes lifted toward the ceiling. The light bulb swayed one last time before going completely dark. In that instant of total blackness, something brushed against his shoulder, cold, clammy, and real. The darkness swallowed everything. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears, so loud he could barely register the rest of the sounds until he heard it. A slow, deliberate step. It came from the pantry doorway, the same spot where the thing had stood. The sound wasn't like normal footsteps. It was heavier, dragging, as if each step cost it effort, or as if its feet weren't shaped quite right. Ethan's fingers fumbled for his flashlight. The beam stuttered to life, slicing through the dark in jittery arcs. The kitchen was empty, but the footsteps didn't stop. They were closer now, echoing from somewhere ahead, pulling him toward the narrow hallway that led deeper into the house. The hallway was suffocating. Walls too close together, ceiling low enough that his hair brushed it when he straightened. The faded wallpaper peeled in long curls, exposing dark stains beneath. Every framed photo along the wall hung crooked, the glass smeared with fingerprints that looked wrong. Too long. Ethan moved forward slowly, each step creaking in protest. The flashlight beam trembled over the pictures. All of them showed the same family, a man, a woman, and a little girl with dark hair. In each photo, the girl's smile looked just a bit different, until, in the last frame, her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, teeth too many to count. The beam shook harder in his hand. Something shifted in the shadows at the end of the hall. The sound came again, closer, quicker. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. The smell hit him next, damp, metallic, and wrong. It filled his lungs, coated his tongue. His stomach lurched. Ethan quickened his pace, glancing over his shoulder every few steps. The hallway seemed to stretch longer with each look, the kitchen receding into blackness. Then he heard breathing. Not his own. It was right behind him. Cold air brushed the back of his neck, raising every hair on his body. His instincts screamed at him to run, but the hallway walls felt like they were closing in, squeezing him forward. He bolted, shoes pounding against warped boards, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the walls. Behind him, the sound followed. Faster now, scraping and thudding in a rhythm that didn't match human movement. Ethan reached the end of the hall and slammed into a closed door. His hands clawed for the knob. It wouldn't turn. He yanked, pushed, rammed his shoulder into it. Nothing. The breathing was louder now, almost in his ear. He turned the flashlight toward it. For a split second, the beam caught a glimpse of pale skin stretched too thin, limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. And then, just as the light hit its face, it was gone. Ethan stumbled backward, his heel catching on the uneven floor. The door behind him swung open on its own. He didn't think. He dove inside, slamming it shut. The room was pitch black except for the faint red glow of something in the far corner. The red glow pulsed, faint at first, like the heartbeat of something sleeping in the dark. Ethan pressed his back against the door, chest heaving, listening for the thing in the hallway. Nothing. The silence was worse than the footsteps. He turned his attention to the glow. It came from the far corner, behind what looked like a toppled dresser. The light wasn't steady. It brightened, dimmed, brightened again, almost in rhythm with his own breathing. The air in the room was thick and warm, unlike the rest of the house. It smelled faintly of iron, but there was another scent under it, sweet, almost cloying, like rotting fruit. Ethan clicked his flashlight back on, sweeping the beam across the room. The walls were bare wood, splintered in places, and covered with deep gouges, claw marks, long and erratic, as if something had been trapped here and tried to tear its way out. The floor was uneven, sections warped and darkened by water stains. In the center lay a threadbare rug, soaked through with something darker than age. He didn't want to think about what it might be. The glow flickered again, drawing his eyes back to the corner. Slowly he stepped toward it, his shoes sinking slightly into the soft floorboards. As he approached, the source became clearer. An old radio, small and square, its metal frame dented, its speaker grill half collapsed inward. The glow came from behind it, seeping through cracks in the casing. The dial was spinning on its own. Static hissed through the speaker, interspersed with faint voices, overlapping, whispering, speaking in tones too low to understand. He leaned closer, trying to make out the words. That's when the voices stopped. A single voice replaced them. "You're not supposed to be here." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The tone was flat, cold, like a statement of fact rather than a warning. Ethan's flashlight sputtered and died, plunging the room into pure red light. Shadows crawled up the walls, bending and stretching in unnatural ways. He backed away from the radio, his hands trembling. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice cracking. The radio crackled again, and the voice returned. "Do you remember the last time you saw her?" Ethan froze. "She remembers you." The glow from behind the radio flared bright, blinding him for an instant. When his vision cleared, he wasn't in the room anymore. He was standing in the woods. The air was damp, the ground soft under his shoes. Moonlight filtered weakly through twisted branches. Somewhere far off, a woman's voice called his name. "Sarah!" he shouted, spinning in circles, trying to locate the sound. The red glow returned, bleeding through the trees like distant fire. The voice called again, closer now, urgent. He pushed toward it, branches snapping under his feet. The light grew brighter with each step until it filled his vision. And then he was back in the room. The radio sat silent in the corner. The glow was gone, but now someone was breathing in the dark, just a few feet away from him. The breathing was wrong. It wasn't just close. It was in rhythm with his own, like an echo that lagged by half a second. Ethan's skin prickled. His eyes strained against the darkness, trying to separate shapes from shadows. He could make out the faint outline of the dresser, the jagged splinters along the wall, but nothing else. The sound grew louder, a wet rasp dragging in and out. "Who's there?" he said, his voice tight. He tried to keep it steady, but it came out like a child's whisper in a church full of silence. No answer. His fingers searched for the flashlight in his pocket, fumbling in panic. When he finally clicked it on, the beam shook wildly across the room. Empty. The light hit the far wall. That's when he saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow that had been peeled from the wall itself, thin, elongated, its edges blurring in and out as if it wasn't entirely here. But then it shifted, slowly, deliberately. It straightened to its full height, towering over him, its head nearly brushing the low ceiling. Its limbs were too long, bending subtly the wrong way. The face, if it could be called that, was a pale oval with no mouth, no nose, and eyes like two pits of wet coal. But as the flashlight beam passed over it, something happened. Where the light touched, the skin writhed, like it was trying to grow a face. It took a step forward. The floorboards groaned under its weight, though the sound was muffled, as if the air around it was swallowing every noise. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "Stay back," he said, though his voice betrayed him. His legs wanted to move, to run, but they felt locked in place. The thing tilted its head, studying him with those pit-like eyes. Then, without warning, it spoke, though its mouth never moved. The words slid directly into his mind. "We've been waiting." Ethan staggered back until he hit the wall. His pulse hammered against his temples. "What do you want?" The shadow shifted again, and in that flickering instant, the voice inside his head changed. It wasn't the thing anymore. It was Sarah. "Help me." The sound of her voice punched the air from his lungs. "Sarah?" he choked out. The creature moved closer, its form blurred at the edges, parts of it peeling away and slithering upward like smoke, until the darkness itself seemed to cling to the ceiling above him. The smell hit him then. Damp earth, metal, and something faintly sweet. The same as in the room before. He tried to sidestep toward the door, but the moment he moved, the thing dropped low to the ground, its limbs splaying at unnatural angles, blocking his path. Its head tilted again, and this time, the coal pit eyes were smiling. The voice returned, a whisper both inside and outside his head. "If you leave, she stays." Ethan's grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles ached. "Where is she?" The creature's form shivered like heat rising from asphalt, and for a second, just a second, its outline shifted into something almost human. A woman's silhouette. Sarah's silhouette. Ethan's chest clenched. He took a step forward, forgetting every instinct to run. "Sarah!" The figure lunged. The flashlight flew from his hand and clattered to the floor, spinning until its beam pointed at the ceiling. In that thin cone of light, Ethan saw the creature unfolding toward him, its limbs stretching, joints bending in the wrong places, until it was almost wrapped around him without touching. Then, darkness. The beam went out, and in the pitch black, the breathing returned, now right beside his ear. "You'll see her soon." The breath against his ear was hot, humid, like someone had been running for miles before leaning in to whisper. Ethan jerked away, swinging his arms blindly in the dark. His fingers touched nothing but stale air. Somewhere in the blackness, the floor creaked. Once, twice. The sound was moving toward the far side of the room, or maybe circling him. It was impossible to tell. He crouched, groping for the flashlight. His fingertips brushed cold metal, and relief surged through him, until something else touched his hand. Not grabbed, touched. A light, deliberate tap, like testing the texture of his skin. Ethan yanked his hand back with a hiss, grabbed the flashlight, and clicked it on. The beam illuminated the dresser, the gouged wall, and the doorway. The doorway that had been closed. It was now wide open. A dim, unnatural light seeped in from the hallway, red again but deeper this time, like the glow of hot coals buried under ash. He didn't want to go out there. Every nerve in his body screamed to stay in the room, but staying meant being trapped with whatever that thing was. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped into the hallway. The boards underfoot were warped, every step releasing a muted groan. The red light came from the far end, beyond a bend in the hall. As he moved, the shadows along the walls seemed to follow him, not with his movement, but ahead of it, slipping around corners like they knew where he was going. He passed a doorway on the left. The smell hit him instantly, damp rot, mold, and something sharper like ammonia. Against his better judgment, he shone the flashlight inside. The room was empty except for a single chair in the center. A rope dangled from the ceiling above it, frayed at the end, swaying gently, though there was no breeze. On the floor beneath the chair lay a small pile of objects, photographs, all face down. His curiosity outweighed his fear for a moment. He stepped inside, crouched, and flipped one over. It was Sarah. She looked younger, her hair longer, standing in front of the very house he was in now. But something was wrong. Her face wasn't quite right. Her eyes were darker than he remembered. Too dark. He flipped another. Sarah again. This time, standing in the woods, her expression unreadable. Behind her, just barely visible between the trees, was a tall, shadowy figure. Ethan dropped the photo, heart thudding. From the hallway, a floorboard screamed under heavy weight. He froze. Slowly, he turned toward the doorway. The red light in the hall had grown brighter, washing the edges of the frame. But the light didn't come from a lamp or fire. It was bleeding, thick, viscous, dripping light, seeping down the hallway walls and pooling on the floorboards. As it spread, it hissed like acid eating into wood. And from the bend in the hallway came a sound, a dragging, scraping noise, punctuated by the rhythmic click of bone on wood. Ethan backed into the corner of the room, every muscle in his body wound tight. The dragon stopped. Silence. Then, from just outside the doorway, a voice. "You're walking the wrong way." It wasn't Sarah this time. It was the thing. The red glow pulsed once, twice, and then the hallway went black. Footsteps entered the room, slow, patient. He couldn't see them, but he felt them in the floor, in his bones. Something brushed against his arm, and in that instant, Ethan realized there was no way out except forward, deeper into the house, toward whatever was calling him, and that was exactly what it wanted. Ethan's breathing was ragged now, not from exertion, but from something far worse. The creeping realization that the house was leading him somewhere. Every turn, every corridor, every half-open door felt intentional, as if each step had already been decided long before he arrived. He stumbled into the hallway again, gripping the flashlight so tightly his fingers throbbed. The beam wavered across peeling wallpaper and warped picture frames. Every photo on the walls had been defaced. Eyes scratched out, faces gouged away until only blank, pale ovals remained. One frame still had shards of glass in it, and as he passed, his own distorted reflection looked back, warped, faceless. His stomach churned. The hallway narrowed, the ceiling lowering just enough to make him hunch. His shoulder brushed against something soft, and when he turned the light, he froze. It was hair, long, black, and matted, nailed to the wall in clumps, as if torn from someone's scalp. He jerked away and hurried forward, the boards beneath him screaming in protest. The air grew heavier with every step, thick and wet like breathing inside a cave. Somewhere behind him, footsteps began to follow. Not hurried, measured, like the pace of someone escorting a prisoner. He forced himself not to look back. Every nerve screamed to run, but he knew the sound would just follow, closer, faster. At the end of the narrowing corridor, a door waited. Its wood was warped and blackened, the paint blistered as if it had been burned. A faint light seeped out from the gap at the bottom, flickering like candlelight. He reached for the handle. It was warm. When he pushed it open, the smell hit him. Sweet, metallic, and wrong. The room inside was larger than it should have been. The proportions were impossible, stretching farther than the dimensions of the house should allow. Candles lined the edges of the floor, their wax pooling into thick rivers, and in the center, a circle had been carved into the floorboards, symbols etched deep into the wood. The grooves were filled with something dark and glossy. Ethan didn't want to guess what it was. Inside the circle sat a chair, and in the chair, Sarah. Her head snapped up at the sound of her name. It was her, but not. Her skin was too pale, her eyes ringed in black like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her lips moved, but the words were a dry rasp. "You shouldn't have come here." Ethan took a step forward, but as soon as his foot crossed the outer edge of the circle, every candle in the room flared at once, their flames bending toward him. Sarah's gaze shifted, slowly, to something over his shoulder. Ethan turned. The doorway was gone. In its place stood the shadow figure, taller than before, its head nearly scraping the impossibly high ceiling. It didn't move, but the air around it twisted, warping the candlelight. Sarah's voice, shaking now. "Don't let it speak to you." The figure tilted its head, and for the first time, Ethan saw movement beneath its skin, as if hundreds of hands pressed from inside, trying to push through. Then it spoke. One will leave. One will stay. The candles guttered. The room seemed to tilt, and Ethan realized with a sickening drop in his stomach that he had no idea who it meant, or which of them it was talking about. The air inside the circle felt different, denser, colder, almost charged with static. Ethan could hear his own pulse in his ears, each beat slower than the last, like the room itself was dragging time down into something thick and syrupy. Sarah didn't move. Her fingers were clamped so tightly to the arms of the chair that her knuckles were bone white. The shadow figure's voice came again, low and vibrating through the floor. One will leave. One will stay. Ethan's throat felt dry as sand. I'm not playing your game. The figure tilted its head slightly, and something about that small motion made Ethan's stomach twist. It wasn't a human movement. It was too smooth, too deliberate, as if its head floated on a hinge instead of a neck. It took one step forward. The boards beneath its foot blackened instantly, curling and splitting as if scorched from within. Sarah flinched. Ethan, don't listen to it. But the thing spoke again, ignoring her. She came here willingly. You were called. Ethan's breath caught. What are you talking about? The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, the walls of the room began to shift. He saw flickers like old film reels, images projected across the boards. Ethan walking in the woods at night, long before Sarah's first message. A door in the trees that hadn't been there before. His own hand, turning the handle, stepping inside. The images bled away, leaving the walls bare again. You think you found this place. You didn't. The voice was inside his head now, curling around his thoughts. Every syllable felt like it left a residue. Sarah's voice broke through. Ethan, look at me. Look at me. He tore his eyes away from the figure and locked onto her. There was desperation there, but also something else. Guilt. He stepped closer to the circle. Sarah, is that true? Did you bring me here? Her lips trembled. I didn't want to, but it doesn't let you leave alone. The figure's laugh was a sound like tearing cloth, stretched too far. Tell him the rest. Sarah shut her eyes, and when she opened them, tears had carved two pale lines down her dirty cheeks. I wasn't supposed to survive. The last one didn't. The words sank in slowly, heavy as lead. The last one? Her gaze dropped to the floor. It's always two. One leaves, one stays, and the one that stays... She broke off, shaking her head. You don't want to know. The figure stepped closer again. Now Ethan could see its surface shifting, faces pressing against it from within, screaming silently before melting back into the blackness. Choose. Ethan's heartbeat roared in his ears. His flashlight was flickering, the beam thinning like it was being sucked away. He felt his grip on reality slipping, the edges of the room blurring. I'm not choosing, he said, though his voice sounded far away. The figure's tone didn't change, but something in the air tightened, as though the entire house inhaled. Then I will. The candles flared, throwing monstrous shadows on the walls. One of them, the tallest, seemed to stretch toward Sarah, its fingers grazing the back of her neck. She shuddered violently. Ethan, she gasped. If it takes me, don't follow. The figure's head turned toward her, then back toward Ethan, as though savoring the tension. 3. The flames bent inward. 2. The floor beneath Ethan's feet began to crack. 1, and then the light went out. The darkness wasn't empty. It moved. Ethan felt it first. An almost imperceptible shift in the air pressure, like standing in the path of something massive that was sliding silently toward him. The silence was total, smothering, until it began to fracture. A sound emerged, faint at first, then swelling. A wet, dragging noise, like something enormous being pulled across the floor. Ethan's breath came in quick, shallow bursts. His flashlight was dead, just a useless piece of plastic in his hand now. The only light was the faint, pulsing glow from the circle carved into the floor, and even that seemed to dim with every passing second. Somewhere in the dark, Sarah whispered, "It's feeding." Her voice was barely audible, but the moment the words left her mouth, the dragging sound stopped. A new noise began. Breathing. Deep, guttural, and impossibly close. Ethan's skin crawled. He took a step back, his foot brushing against the cracked floorboards, and the sound instantly shifted position. Now it was behind him. He spun, and for a fraction of a second he saw it. The figure was no longer just shadow. It had form now, its surface rippling with shapes like muscle and sinew twisting beneath tar. The arms were too long, fingers ending in points that scraped against the ground as it moved. Its head tilted, and the absence of a face somehow conveyed amusement. Sarah's voice broke the moment. "Ethan, don't look at it too long." But it was too late. Ethan's vision tunneled. The edges of the room melted away, replaced by flashes, memories that weren't his. A man screaming inside the same room decades ago. A woman clawing at the walls until her nails tore off. A child's hand, pale and limp, being dragged into the circle. Then, his own reflection, years from now, sitting in the chair where Sarah was. Ethan stumbled backward, wrenching his eyes away. His chest felt tight, like he'd inhaled smoke. The figure began to speak again, its voice now layered. Multiple tones, male and female, young and old, all speaking at once. One stays, one leaves, the house remembers. Sarah's chair scraped against the floor as she tried to stand, but invisible hands seemed to pin her down. She strained against them, teeth gritted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Take me, just let him go!" she screamed. Ethan's heart wrenched. "No, I'm not letting it choose." The figure's hand rose, impossibly long fingers stretching until they nearly touched the ceiling. Then it snapped its arm downward. The candles reignited in a violent burst, flooding the room with sickly yellow light. And now Ethan saw everything. The walls weren't wood anymore. They were flesh, pale, veined, pulsing gently as if the house itself was alive. Faces pressed outward from beneath the surface, mouths open in silent screams before being sucked back in. The circle on the floor was bleeding. Not wax, blood, thick and steaming, filling the grooves of the carved symbols. And from the center of that circle, a dark tendril shot out toward Ethan. He dove aside, hitting the floor hard, his shoulder screaming in pain. The tendril missed him by inches, retracting with a whip-crack sound. Sarah's voice. "You can't kill it, Ethan! You can only trade!" The figure stepped fully into the circle now, and the bleeding symbols flared bright red. Every instinct in Ethan's body screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The room had no doors anymore, no windows, just pulsating walls that seemed to breathe in sync with the creature's movements. The tendrils uncoiled again, this time faster, branching into multiple black whips that lashed toward him. He grabbed the broken leg of a chair and swung wildly, the wood connecting with a wet, almost rubbery resistance. One tendril recoiled, but the others closed in. A sharp pain tore across his ribs as one caught him, dragging him toward the circle. The closer he got, the colder the air became, and he could feel a pull, like gravity, but wrong, pulling at something inside him rather than his body. Sarah screamed, struggling against whatever held her. "It's taking your name! If it gets your name, you can't leave. Ethan's mind was chaos, but one thought cut through. Names have power here. He twisted, planting the chair leg into the floor, and used it to wedge himself against the pull. The tendril tightened, the points of its claws digging into his skin, but he held on. The figure leaned closer, and though it had no eyes, Ethan felt it looking at him. It whispered, not into his ears, but directly into his skull. "Tell me your name, and I will let her go." The pull intensified. His grip began to slip. Sarah was crying now, shaking her head violently. "Don't do it. You don't know what happens when you stay." The figure's tone softened, almost coaxing. "One will stay. One will leave. Decide." Ethan's mind raced. He could feel his willpower thinning, fraying like an old rope. He knew he had seconds before it tore the name from his mind by force. And then he thought of something. The air was thick. So thick, Ethan felt like he was breathing syrup. The tendril tightened around his ribs, every squeeze forcing the breath out of him in sharp, panicked bursts. That voice, it wasn't speaking to him anymore. It was speaking through him, rattling his bones with each word. "Give me your name." His vision blurred. The circle beneath him throbbed, a living wound in the floor, the blood within it swirling in patterns that hurt to look at. Every swirl seemed to pull at something in his head. Memories, moments, all unraveling. Sarah's voice broke through the haze. "Don't let it in! Ethan, look at me! Look at me!" He forced his gaze toward her. Her eyes were wide, desperate, reflecting the candlelight in a way that made her look almost ghostly herself. The thing holding her down was no longer invisible. It was a web of black, spindly fingers sprouting from the wall, each tipped with sharp hooks digging into her skin. The wall behind her pulsed harder now, faces pressing outward, mouths opening in soundless wails. One stays, one leaves. The house remembers. The words didn't echo. They stuck, clinging to his mind like cobwebs. Ethan's head pounded. If the thing learned his name, it wouldn't just take his life. It would erase him from everything. No memory, no trace, not even in Sarah's mind. And then, an idea struck him. He stopped fighting. The tendril, sensing his surrender, slackened slightly, pulling him closer to the circle. Cold air poured from it, coating his skin with goosebumps, and the smell, like rotting earth and wet copper, burned his nostrils. Ethan swallowed hard, and with the smallest breath said, "I'll give you a name." The figure leaned in, the tendrils shifted like snakes, coiling around him in a mock embrace. "Say it." Ethan's lips parted, and he whispered Sarah's name. Her eyes went wide, confusion flashing across her face. But before she could speak, the tendrils around her tightened, dragging her toward the circle instead. The figure hesitated, the pulsing light dimming slightly as if the ritual itself was unsure. Sarah screamed. "What are you doing?" Ethan met her gaze, tears stinging his eyes. "If it takes me, you'll never get out. If it takes you, I can still try." She shook her head violently. "No! You don't understand. It won't let you go." But the thing was already moving. The circle's blood began to bubble, and a deep, guttural rumble shook the floorboards. The symbols carved into the wood glowed brighter, locking onto Sarah like a predator on prey. Ethan's heart pounded, but inside that pounding was a seed of defiance, because the name he gave wasn't quite hers. He had altered it, twisted one syllable, turning it into something almost right, but not enough for the binding to be perfect. The effect was immediate. The circle spasmed, the glow flickering. The tendrils holding Sarah trembled, some retracting as if burned. The figure tilted its head, the smooth expanse of where its face should have been rippling in irritation. It spoke again, but the voice was wrong now, broken, fragmented. "You lie." Ethan gritted his teeth. "You want a name? Take mine." And with that he shouted, not his true name, but the name of another, one he had read in the diary upstairs, the name of the man who built this house. The reaction was instant. The entire room shuddered violently. The walls split open, black liquid pouring from the cracks, and the faces embedded in them began screaming, actual deafening screams. The tendrils flailed wildly, letting go of both Ethan and Sarah. The figure staggered backward, its form distorting as if something inside it was tearing free. The blood in the circle caught fire, flames climbing higher than the ceiling, but they didn't burn red or orange. They burned black, sucking in the light around them. Sarah crawled toward Ethan, coughing, grabbing his arm. "What did you do?" Ethan hauled her up. "I gave it the only name it can't take without burning." The figure roared, not in pain but in rage. The sound was so loud it shook dust from the rafters. Then it lunged. The figure lunged. Not fast, instant. One heartbeat, it was across the room. The next, its form swallowed the space between them. The tendrils snapped forward like whips, splintering the wood, leaving deep gouges that smoked and bled black liquid. Ethan shoved Sarah toward the far wall. "Run!" he shouted. But the house shifted instantly. The floor beneath her tilted, sending her sprawling toward the circle again. The flames roared higher, bending toward her like they were alive. The figure's shadow fell over Ethan. It didn't just block the light, it ate it. His flashlight flickered and died, leaving only the candlelight and the unnatural glow of the burning black fire. The tendrils shot toward his throat, but this time he didn't step back. Instead, he grabbed the nearest candle and hurled it directly into the circle. The reaction was immediate. Every symbol carved into the wood screamed, not a sound in his ears, but deep inside his skull. The black flames twisted, shooting up like a tornado, pulling in everything. Dust, shards of glass, even the nails from the floor. Sarah scrambled to her feet, fighting against the tilting floor, her hands gripping at broken boards. "Ethan! It's pulling us in!" The pull grew stronger. His boots skidded, the tendrils wrapping around his leg like they meant to drag him down with them. He spotted it. Across the room, the warped doorway they had entered from earlier. Open again. It was now or never. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's hand in a bruising grip. "Hold on!" They ran, stumbling, slipping, every step a fight against the dragging pull of the circle. The figure didn't chase. It stood in the center, its faceless head following them, tendrils flailing in fury. As they neared the doorway, the walls on either side burst open. From them poured arms. Not tendrils, arms. Human arms, pale and thin, each one clawing for a piece of them. Some gripped his jacket, others tangled in Sarah's hair. He tore free, feeling skin rip beneath their nails, and shoved Sarah through the doorway first. The moment she crossed the threshold, the pull lessened for her, but doubled for him. Something yanked hard at his ankle, dragging him backward. He looked back. The figure was holding him now, not with tendrils, but with its hands. They were too many, sprouting from its body like weeds, all gripping him at once. The faceless head tilted, and it spoke in that deep, rattling voice. "One stays, one leaves." Ethan's mind raced. It wasn't just a threat. It was the rule of the house. He glanced at Sarah, her face pale, tears streaming. Her lips moved. "Don't you dare." Ethan took one deep breath. "Then take me." And with all the strength he had left, he kicked backward. into the circle. The black fire erupted, swallowing him whole. Sarah screamed his name, but the doorway slammed shut before she could reach in. The house shook once, violently, and then went still. She was standing outside now. The night was silent, the forest unmoving. She turned, but where the door had been was only rotted wood, nailed shut decades ago. Her chest heaved. She stumbled backward, staring at the silent house. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, from inside, just barely audible, a whisper. "One stays." The voice was Ethan's. "If you made it this far, you're braver than most. But tell me, what would you have done if you were Ethan? Leave your answer in the comments, if you dare. And if you want to step into the next nightmare with us, hit that like button, subscribe, and keep the lights on. You'll need them.